Hi, everyone, and very warm welcome to this edition of insideTauck. My name is Dustin Smith, and I work here on the marketing team here at Tauck. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today from wherever you're logging in from, whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening. For those of you joining for the first time, it's wonderful to have you and welcome. And for those of you who are returning, welcome back. It's great to see you again, and thanks for joining. We've got a really unique event today for insideTauck. The first time we've done this, a live bicycle tour through the beautiful streets of Florence. This platform is something we created a few months ago to celebrate our 95th year and to connect with one another until we can get out there and travel again. It's a great way for us to share with you the world's great destinations, cultural sites, expert knowledge like what you'll hear today from Birgit and Bill. And we hope it provides you with some new insights on Florence today in a fun and engaging way, and hope the sights and sounds come alive through your screen as Bill cycles through the streets of Florence. And hopefully it provides some inspiration for your next journey, which we're all longing to do as soon as we can. So before we get started, just a couple housekeeping items. So you are all on mute as you've joined the webinar today. If you do have questions, please post them in the chat function. I will be monitoring that throughout, and we will have time at the end for 15 to 20 minutes of Q&A. If we don't get to everyone's questions, I will record them on my end, and we'll hopefully have Birgit and Bill provide some written answers, and we'll follow up with an email shortly. Today's lecture should last about an hour and 15 minutes, about an hour bike ride, then again, that 15 to 20 minute Q&A. It will be recorded, so just like all of our other insideTauck events, you can find the recording up on our blog, The Taucker, in the coming days. Also new today, we're actually streaming live on Facebook. So if you do have any technical difficulties on Zoom along the way, you can find us on the Tauck Facebook page where we're streaming live. So today we have the really good fortune of being joined by TD Tauck Director Birgit Enslin, as well as Bill Dillon. Birgit, who's a longtime Tauck Director, and Bill, a wonderful partner of ours out in Florence. Birgit has been a Tauck Director for actually over 25 years. And has worked with us all over the world. Living in Florence now, she primarily leads tours in Italy. And along with being a certified local guide in Florence, she loves art, history, and cycling the Tuscan countryside, which we're all dreaming of and jealous of her for. Bill is an American who lives in Tuscany. He moved there in 1993. Bill loves food, local plants, and local food. A foodie by nature, he stays fit, though, through his real passion, which is cycling. And he has 17 years of experience leading bicycle tours in the countryside. Bill welcomes all of our Tauck Bridges groups, our family tours in Florence, with a Fiat 500 ride through the beautiful Florence landscape. So without further ado, I will now turn this over to Birgit to start the tour. So Birgit.
Okay, thank you, Dustin. Yes, good evening from Florence, ladies and gentlemen. I am Birgit Enslin, Tauck Director since 1994. I also work as a licensed local guide in Florence. It's such a pleasure to finally be with you. My colleague, Bill Dillon. Show your face, Bill.
Hello, everybody. And as a true cyclist and true spirit, I'm going to ride through the rain. It's sprinkling here.
Well, Bill and I are so excited to do what we love most, which is show our guests Florence. We have missed you dearly this year, and since you cannot be with us, we are bringing Florence to you. On our tour this evening, which will last about an hour, we're taking you through the city center of Florence. Bill, with his bicycle and his camera, will be our eyes, and I will be the voice explaining what we're seeing. Now remember, folks, this is a live tour. Very unique and different. It's a bike tour, and we really want you to feel as if you were here with us tonight in the squares and also cycling through the tiny streets of Florence. Right now, Bill is standing in Piazza della Repubblica, right in the heart of town, in front of a bronze model of the city. We would like to show you where we're going to be taking you tonight. There's the bicycle, there's the map. On this map, on this bronze model, you can see how the city of Florence is actually divided into two parts by the Arno River. The upper portion is where Florence was originally founded in 59 BC, so in the 1st century before Christ by the Romans. Below the Arno River is where the Oltrarno is located. That means the other side of the Arno River, which was settled in the 4th and 5th century AD. And the two parts are connected by a bridge, a very famous bridge called Ponte Vecchio. That translates into Old Bridge. There used to be fishmongers and butchers on the bridge. Nowadays, we have a lot of goldsmith shops and jewelry shops on the bridge. So we're going to start in Piazza della Repubblica, and Bill is going to indicate that where he is standing, Piazza della Repubblica, which is where the city was originally founded. So that's where we're going to dwell for a moment on the Roman history. Then we will go over toward the cathedral area. That's where the Baptistery is located. Then the cathedral next to the Baptistery. Unfortunately, somebody took the bell tower away as a souvenir. There should be a part that is Giotto's bell tower. From the religious center of Florence, we're going to move through the medieval part of the town. This is where Dante Alighieri was born in 1265. We're going to end up in Piazza della Signoria, which is where the City Hall of Florence is located. And then from there, we head down the street through Borgo dei Greci, and we finish our tour in Piazza Santa Croce, the piazza, the square in front of Holy Cross Church, the Franciscan church of town. So first, I'd like to explain where the name of the square where Bill is standing comes from. In 1946, on the 2nd of June, is when the Italians decided in a referendum that they were going to become a republic. Up to that point, from 1861, Italy had been a kingdom. The square here used to be dedicated to the king. There was a statue of the Savoy king in the square, but then after the 2nd of June, 1946, the statue was removed, put somewhere else, and the square acquired its current name, Piazza, which means square, della Repubblica, of the Republic. We just call it Republic Square. Now, this is also where the Romans originally founded Florence, and that happened in 59 BC. It was Julius Caesar himself who founded a town called Florentia. That makes us understand that the Romans founded the city in the springtime, because the springtime was protected by Flora, the goddess of springtime. Flora also means flower in Latin. So the name given was Florentia, the town that is protected by Flora. And the reason why the Romans founded a town here was because there was a bridge that was leading over the Arno River. And Dustin, if you could mute Bill for a second. So there was a bridge that led over the Arno River, which was part of a thoroughfare, a major thoroughfare that led from Rome all the way to northern Italy and to France. So that bridge needed to be protected. And the best way to do that was to build a town close to it. So that's where Florence comes into being, 59 BC. The Romans based the layout of the new town on a Roman military camp. And a Roman military camp always had two main axes. One that went from north to south, which was called the Cardus. And Bill is actually showing you where today the Cardus would be. Cardus, heart, that's where words like cardiology and cardiac come from. And then there was a street that went from east to west, which was called the Decumanus, which goes from where you see the merry-go-round and underneath the archway there. The two are perpendicular to one another. Where they cross, that's where in the Roman period, the main square was located, the Forum, F-O-R-U-M, and that would be today Piazza della Repubblica. Then the Romans created parallel streets so that a grid pattern developed, and eventually they surrounded the whole thing with a city wall. And on the model, once again, Bill can point out to us where the original Roman town of Florentia came into being, because to this day, the layout of the town is the same that it used to be, with all the parallel streets and the grid pattern and the main square, which is today Piazza della Repubblica. Now, what I would like to do is I want to bring up a show and tell share screen so that you can see what in the past the forum looked like. So let me go ahead and do that. There we go. And while I point out the buildings on the show and tell, Bill will follow me with his camera so he can indicate where these buildings used to stand in the past. So in the Forum, the main square in the Roman time, we would have had the Capitoline Temple. Capo means head, so the most important temple in a Roman town. This is where Jupiter, a statue of Jupiter, would have been located, together with the statue of Juno, his wife, and the goddess of war and wisdom, Minerva. That would be where the Pensione Pendini is today, as Bill is focusing in right now. Then, next to the Pensione Pendini, there is the archway, so that would have been over here, just next to the Capitoline Temple. Bill, let's go over to the coffee house, Pazzowski, where the coffee house is today. You're going to see it in just a moment with a white awning. That's where in the past this building would have been located, the so-called Basilica. And the Basilica was a building where lots of activities, which were usually done outside in the square, were done when it was raining. So for example, justice was pronounced there. It was a courthouse. That's also where you did business. That's where you settled disputes and arguments. Behind these two buildings, there would have been an aqueduct, which brought in pure water from about 10 miles away. And water was necessary for drinking purposes, but also for the baths. There were at least 2 big baths in Florence. You know how the Romans really counted on water in the sense that in the baths, they practiced what was called salus per aquam, which means health through water. Salus per aquam, SPA, that's where the modern word spa comes from. Then one more thing I want to point out on this little show and tell, there was also a statue of abundance in the Forum. And the Statue of Abundance was a good omen for the city of Florence, for economic prosperity, and also for good fortune in general. And we still have such a statue in Republic Square today. Nowadays it stands on a column, and Bill is pointing to it. It's right behind the merry-go-round. So that used to be the Forum. The aspect, the look of the square today goes back to the late 1800s. That's when the whole square was completely remodeled, and not just the square, but also the blocks adjacent to the square. At that point, the area, which in the Middle Ages had served as a market, was rather run down. And so it was decided by the city fathers to remodel what we now call Piazza della Repubblica and also the adjacent blocks. Now, going out into Piazza della Repubblica, we see 2 coffee houses. One is Gilli, which is the oldest coffee house, and Bill is actually going on his bike now to show us Gilli. Gilli goes back to 1733. It's the oldest coffee house in Florence. It was founded by a Swiss family, but has not always been located in Piazza della Repubblica, only for about 100 years now. Before it was somewhere else. Then, there we have it, Gilli. Then, going over toward the left, we have another coffee house, which is Pazzowski. And what I want to drive home here, the point that I want to make is, imagine yourselves next year in this very same spot. This is going to be you when you come to Florence, looking out while you have your aperitivo over Piazza della Repubblica and watching Italian life go by, dolce vita. So now Bill is going to ride around these 2 blocks behind the coffee houses. In those 2 blocks is where in the past the Jewish ghetto was located. That was a rather inglorious time period of the city. Jews had been encouraged to come to Florence already in the 1430s by Cosimo the Elder de' Medici to work as moneylenders, a profession which was, at least theoretically, forbidden to Christians. Life of the Jewish community was marked by periods of integration, respect, and collaboration, but also by intolerance, separation, and repression, depending on who was ruling the city of Florence. The repression culminated in the establishment of the Jewish ghetto right next to where Piazza della Repubblica is today. In 1555, Pope Paul V, during the time of the so-called Counter-Reformation, issued a papal bull, a law which forced the Italian cities to enclose their Jewish communities in a restricted space, a ghetto, where the gates to the outside were closed up at nighttime. The ghetto lasted almost 200 years. In 1737, the Medici family died out, and when the last Medici ruler, Gian Gastone, had passed away, a more enlightened ruler started ruling Florence, and that was Peter Leopold from the Austrian Habsburg family. That is when the ghetto was abolished and the Jewish families were reintegrated into the Florentine society. After the unification of Italy in 1861, the religious climate became more liberal, and the Jewish community commissioned a monumental synagogue, which was inaugurated in 1882. And what I would like to do is, I'm going to bring up a picture of the synagogue. And there we go. Synagogue of Florence. Personally, I think it's one of the most beautiful synagogues that we have in this country. There's a museum upstairs as well. So when you come to Florence, please put that on your bucket list, because it's one building that definitely needs to be seen. The population of Florence nowadays is 380,000, and 900 are Jewish citizens. And talking about, there's Bill riding his bike, talking about beautiful buildings. So Bill, what you got for us? Beautiful, thank you. So now we're
it's a great light out right now.
Yes, I can tell, wonderful. I can see how the sun shines a little bit on the religious complex. So let's stay with the frame where you are, just past this car there, for a moment, because I want for our guests to imagine that they're standing here taking a picture of the religious center of Florence. After the Roman period, which ended with the fall of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century after Christ, when the barbarians had moved into the Italian peninsula, there was corruption on the inside, so that's why the Western Roman Empire fell. Italy plunged into the Middle Ages. Not much is happening throughout the Middle Ages, in the sense that it was only in the 1100s and 1200s that Florence came back to glory, in the sense that at that point they had decided to bring in wool from places like England, Scotland, the south of Tuscany, the Flanders, Spain and Portugal, and from that wool, they made beautiful and very high quality fabric. There was work in town, so the people from the countryside arrived in Florence, and quickly over the course of the 1200s, the population rose to 100,000 people. So of course, a building boom starts. And the building boom, people have to be housed somewhere, also includes this area of town. There used to be a cathedral on the premises, Santa Reparata, but of course for 100,000 people, it was now too small. So it was decided to begin with the building of a new cathedral in 1296 on the 8th of September, which in the Catholic religion is celebrated as the birth of Mary. What we're seeing here now in this beautiful frame that Bill is capturing for us is the Baptistery on the left-hand side, that octagonal building. That's the oldest building in the religious complex, about 1,000 years old. That is where, until 1957, regularly, children were baptized. You can still get baptized in there, but you have to ask for specific permission by the Archbishop of Florence. You may wonder why we have a separate baptistry. Well, in the past, unless you were baptized, you couldn't go inside the cathedral. So that's why you have a separate baptistry. And our baptistry is dedicated to Saint John the Baptist, who is our patron saint. Then in the center, we see the cathedral, which is a word that comes from cathedra, which means in Greek and in Latin, the place where you sit. So that refers to the chair behind the altar where the bishop, in this case, the Archbishop of Florence, gets to sit down. And that church, the bishop's church, is usually the most important one in a town. So that's why the Italians refer to it not as cattedrale in Italian, but as il Duomo, which is a word that comes from Latin domus, house of God. So for the Italians, this is the Duomo. And the Duomo, of course, has as one part Brunelleschi's dome, which we're going to talk about in a few moments a little bit more in detail. And then on the right-hand side, there it is, Giotto's bell tower. Giotto was the artist and architect who started the bell tower in 1334. Several other architects worked on it. It was finished by 1369. Let's go a little bit closer now, Bill. Let's head over toward the baptistry first. And what we would like to show you is one set of doors. There are 3 sets of doors that were all made during different time periods. So Bill is going to focus on this set of doors first. We can see in these doors 28 panels. The doors were made in the 1330s and tell the story of Saint John the Baptist, our patron saint, San Giovanni. You read the doors as if you were reading book pages. You go down on the left and then you start at the top on the right and you go down that page. We're going to focus in on one particular panel. Each panel contains one story from the life of Saint John the Baptist. And Bill is going to focus in on the one panel just a little bit further down. I believe it's one down, Bill. There we go, that's it. That's where Saint John the Baptist baptizes Jesus. What I would like for you to notice here, folks, is that we are working with what's called a quadrifoil frame in artistic jargon, which means that it's a frame that looks a little bit like a clover leaf. Then the artist is working with just 2 dimensions. There's a background and then there's a foreground, and the scene develops in the foreground. Keep that in mind because this knowledge is going to be handy when I show you another set of doors in a moment, which are the so-called paradise doors. Before we get to those, however, we want to go a little bit more into detail as far as the facade of the cathedral is concerned. So that's where we're headed right now. The cathedral took from 1296 until 1446 to be built, so approximately 150 years, which was not too unusual back then when things took a lot longer than they do today. There were wars going on and the plague hit. However, they never got around to finishing the facade. So the facade, the front of the cathedral that you're seeing here, was only done in the 1870s, right after the unification of Italy. And if you look closely, you're going to see that the outside decoration is made from 3 colors of marble, which reflect the colors of the Italian flag. The white marble, which comes from Carrara, a town in Tuscany. Then the green marble, which is local from just outside Florence. And the red marble, which also comes from Tuscany, from south of Siena. So green, white, and red. The cathedral is dedicated to Saint Mary. In fact, the name is Santa Maria del Fiore, Saint Mary of the Flower. We see Mary sitting in the gable above the main door in divine light. She's taken up into heaven. This is the moment that the Catholics refer to as the Assumption of Mary into heaven, a very important holiday celebrated on the 15th of August. The Italians call that Ferragosto. That's when everybody takes their vacation, usually a week before Ferragosto and a week after Ferragosto. And then we see Mary again. Bill's going to go a little bit further up. There, she's now in heaven, and she sits on the throne of heaven together with Jesus Christ, flanked by 6 disciples on the right and 6 disciples on the left. Now we'll swing around. There are the disciples. To the left, down the street, in a moment, we will see in the distance a brown sandstone building. A lot of our buildings are brown sandstone buildings because that's a local building material. This is Palazzo Medici. This is where the Medici family, who ruled Florence over the course of 3 centuries with several interruptions, lived for the first 100 years from the 1440s to 1540. Palazzo Medici, today Medici Riccardi, because eventually the Riccardi family bought it. Then let's come back to the religious center. Let's focus a little bit more on the baptistry. Beautiful shot there of the baptistry, oldest building. Decoration, once again, white marble from Carrara, the green marble, octagonal, so 8 corners. And of course, there's symbolic value to that in the sense that the 8 refers to the 8th day of Passion, which is the day when Jesus Christ was resurrected. And just like Christ is reborn on the 8th day of Passion, that is how a baby, through baptism, is reborn a Christian. That's why many baptistries have an octagonal shape. Of course, the most magnificent part of the baptistry are the doors that we're seeing, the so-called gates of paradise. In this case, we only have 10 panels and not 28, as was the case on the previous doorway that we showed you. The 10 panels show stories from the Old Testament, such as the Genesis, Cain and Abel, Moses receiving the 10 Commandments, David and Goliath, and so on. The doors were made, the panels were made by Lorenzo Ghiberti between 1425 and 1452. Over the course of 27 years, he worked on them. He had other things going on. And what we want to show you here, and the point that we want to make, is the reason why Lorenzo Ghiberti can do with only 10 panels is because perspective at that point had been rediscovered. And I'm going to illustrate that now. Perspective was something that the Romans were familiar with. They knew that if you wanted to show the 3 dimensions that surround us in real life on a 2-dimensional surface, like a relief or a painting, then your lines have to come together in a vanishing point, and everything that's further behind has to be a little bit smaller. So perspective is rediscovered in 1420 by Filippo Brunelleschi, the builder of the dome of the Cathedral of Florence. And with that, a period starts, which we call Renaissance, because perspective itself is a rebirth of some things that the Romans did or knew. So with perspective in 1420, Renaissance begins. Ghiberti uses it beautifully, as we can illustrate in this panel that Bill is focusing on. The panel is about Abraham and the story of Abraham. In the lower left-hand corner in the foreground, we see Abraham and his wife Sarah, who's just coming out of the tent behind Abraham. He's 100 years old, she's 90 years old. They're having visitors. 3 angels are coming to visit with them. And they're announcing to Abraham and Sarah that they're going to have a son, which both of them cannot believe because they're so old, so they start laughing. But then, sure enough, a year later, Isaac is born. Isaac means he who laughs. Then there's another story from the life of Abraham, which is when God challenges Abraham. He says, I want you to sacrifice your son Isaac, the dearest person to you, so that you can prove your faith. Well, Abraham does as he's supposed to. So with the 2 servants that we see in the lower right-hand corner and a donkey, they go to Mount Moriah. Then on a different ground, on a ground further back, we see Abraham in the upper right-hand corner, who is just about to sacrifice Isaac, but thank goodness at the very last minute, bells at the very last minute, there is the angel flying in, holding Abraham's arm and says, don't worry, God believes you, everything's okay, you don't have to sacrifice Isaac, sacrifice that ram next to the tree. So story of Abraham and Isaac on different grounds, which is now possible with the rediscovery of perspective, beautifully done by Lorenzo Ghiberti. And when Ghiberti was finished, of course, he wanted to sign his magnificent work. So he does it by putting his head into a place where you would usually expect a doorknob. So come a little bit further down, Bill. There he is, the bald-headed man right there. That's Lorenzo Ghiberti. And next to him is his son Vincenzo. He was also a sculptor who did the frame around the Gates of Paradise. Why are they called Gates of Paradise? Because Michelangelo coined that name. He came here to the doors in the late 1400s. He said, these doors are so stupendo. They're so magnificent. They deserve to be the Gates of Paradise. And the name stuck. The Porte del Paradiso, Gates of Paradise. What you're looking at, folks, though, are copies. Not to worry, though, because the originals are kept in the Cathedral Museum under the right climatic conditions, and the copies are very well done, and they were just cleaned, so they look nice and splendid. The Gates of Paradise. All right, Bill, you ready to go on? Let's head over to the bell tower. Okay, I like
which we just heard some of those bells.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that we could hear those. So bell tower, folks, you might be wondering about the army standing here. Well, they're here as a show of force. After Paris a few years ago, it was decided that the military should show itself in certain parts of the city. So that's why they're there. Well, here we want to focus on a part of the bell tower, which is the lower register, because that is where we see the coat of arms of Florence. It's a white shield with a red iris on it. Remember, Florentia means the town that is watched over or dedicated to Flora, the goddess of springtime, but Florentia, Flora, also means flower. So we do have a flower as our city symbol. There's one more thing that we want to show our guests, Bill. Let's go to the corner. Nice shot of the bell tower here. 89 meters high, so about 300 feet, a little bit lower than Brunelleschi's dome, which is what we're going to show you next. Okay. And while I speak, this is a good frame. So for a moment, let's just stay on that frame right here. And then while I tell you the story of the dome, Bill is going to look at it with his camera from different viewpoints. So this is what we call Brunelleschi's dome, the dome of the Cathedral of Florence. Imagine that by 1420, the Florentines had managed to build the cathedral with one exception. There was a gaping hole over the altar area. And that gaping hole needed to be filled with a dome. That's where Filippo Brunelleschi comes into play. He had been down to Rome with his sculptor friend Donatello. In Rome, they had seen buildings such as the Pantheon, which has a dome that has about the same diameter as the diameter of the dome of Santa Maria del Fiore. So Brunelleschi looks very carefully at it. He takes his notes. He's pretty sure he can figure out how to build this dome in Florence. The thing was that he wanted to build it without a wooden centering, without a wooden support structure, which would have been too cumbersome, too long, and too costly to build. So when he arrives back in Florence, he knows he still has to persuade and convince the wardens of the cathedral that he's the right man for the job. He wants to avoid to give too much away of his project, because if he does, then the wardens of the cathedral might choose somebody else. That person is going to be paid less, and Brunelleschi is going to be out of the picture. So he goes to the meeting with the administrators with an egg in his pocket, a hard-boiled egg. He says to the administrators in the meeting, listen, you guys, I'm ready to show my project. I'll give you all the details. But before I do that, I want one of you to take the egg and set it down onto the table and make it stand up. So they all try. Nobody can do it. Egg falls over. They try again. They can't do it. So finally, Brunelleschi takes the egg and smacks it down onto the table. Now it's cracked open at the bottom, but it stands nice and upright. And he said, that's how you do it. And everybody's in uproar. Oh, Brunelleschi, you're cheating. Anybody can do that, they say. He says, well, you sure didn't know before I showed you, did you? So it looks like you're just going to have to trust me on the dome as well. That's how I'm going to make it. It's going to look like an egg. Apparently, based on this legendary story, he did get the commission, and he started working on the dome in 1420. The way he did it was, again, I'm going to bring up a share screen so I can show you. He knew that he had to be light with the building of the dome. So he decides to create two shells, an inside shell and an outside shell. And in between, there's a lot of nothing, a lot of air, which doesn't weigh anything. So that is how he keeps the whole thing light. But also, since he does not have a centering to rely on, he needs to build it in a very stable fashion. So that's where these ribs come in. And in addition to that, he uses what is called a herringbone pattern. There we go. Where he spirals his way up with bricks that he has specifically made for the building of the dome, so that all the 8 sides, once again, it is an octagon, are connected with each other. And then just going back, we also see where the 2 shells are connected with each other. So that is what keeps it very stable. So Brunelleschi works on this from 1420 to 1436. Only 16 years is how long it takes him to do the whole dome. A piece of trivia is that the part that you see at the very top, the so-called lantern, that white portion, poor Brunelleschi had to go through another competition in order to have his lantern approved after he had already built the dome. They start with the lantern in 1446. Brunelleschi had done a model for it. He did not see it finished because he died in 1446. So the dome has been up for almost 600 years. In 1420, exactly 600 years ago, is when Filippo Brunelleschi started it. We call it a Renaissance masterpiece. This is where we can talk about Florence as a Renaissance city. We have so many artifacts and works from the Renaissance period. That's why it's called the City of Renaissance. So he based himself on the Pantheon, which is a building from antiquity. So we call it a Renaissance dome. And it stood proud and tall for almost 600 years now. Absolutely beautiful. Thank you. And I really enjoy, Bill, how the cathedral is suffused in that lovely evening light. So in Florence right now, it is about 6:38, 6:40. Let's head on. We're going to go up the main street of Florence. If you like, Bill, you can unmute yourself so that we have a little bit of the ambiance for a moment.
Okay, here I am.
Okay, great. So stay here for a moment. Via Calzaioli is the street that Bill is heading down now. He will focus in on the street sign. Calzaioli comes from calze, which means stockings, and the Calzaioli were the stocking makers. So they used to have their shops along that particular street, which is now one of the main streets in Florence. It's the street that connects the religious center of Florence with the political center of Florence, where we will be taking you as well. That's Piazza della Signoria, Government Square. We are going to go, however, through the medieval quarter of town, which is a little bit more picturesque. So Bill is going to take a left down the next street, which is called Via delle Oche. Oche means geese, because there was a goose market that took place every year on the 1st of November, All Saints' Day, Ognissanti, in the cathedral square. In the street, Via delle Oche, there used to be a synagogue as well, in a private house. We're taking a right turn, and that's where we get into the smaller alleyways. Things get a little bit narrower. I would like you to note how the restaurants have tables outside. They are allowed to do that without an extra charge because the government wants for people to sit outside because of COVID, because obviously it's a lot less dangerous if you're outside rather than being inside. Now we are in Piazza Santa Elisabetta. We see a tower house. That's what this area of town is famous for. Elisabetta, because Elizabeth was the mother of Saint John the Baptist, the patron saint of the city. Now, tower houses were very typical back in the 12 and 1300s, when so many people came to Florence. Everybody wanted to live within the city walls. That was the safest thing to do. So in order to do that, they had to build these high houses, some of them up to 7 stories high. Sometimes the space in the tower houses was so narrow. This one is actually a rather big example of a tower house. Sometimes they were so narrow that they had to put ladders up inside the tower house to get from one room to the next. Or they also might have stairs on the outside of the tower house. So that's what those projections that you see on the outside of the tower house were for. Sometimes if a tower house was close by, then you could also throw a drawbridge over from one tower house to the next. So that's where the projections came in very handy as well. Now these tower houses, they are usually based on a square or rectangular floor plan. However, in the square, we see one which has a semicircular shape. Can you go over to the right, Bill? There we go. And that tower house is semicircular. And I know that many of you are going to get excited because you have stayed in this hotel. This is now a hotel in Florence. The Hotel Brunelleschi, our classic Italy tour, stays right in the heart of the city. So this semicircular tower house is part of the Hotel Brunelleschi. And it is semicircular because the foundation of this particular tower house is a Roman pool, which happened to be semicircular because there used to be baths underneath here. So when the Romans had raised, when the barbarians had raised what the Romans had built to the ground, the foundations of the buildings were still left, in this case a pool, and the pool was used as the foundation for this particular tower house, which dates back to about 800, and therefore is the oldest house in Florence. And I see,
very good.
Ooh, yes.
I got to interrupt you because look, I see a friend of ours.
Oh,
a
wonderful.
Friend of Tauck's over here, Stefano.
That's awesome.
Buonasera. Stefano is here at the Hotel Brunelleschi. Come stai? Tutto bene? Tutto a posto? We should be shaking hands though, right? Sorry about that. You got to go put that stuff on your hands now. How's business?
Business, well, we just reopened last June. But believe me, we're still waiting for our American guests and our friends at Tauck.
The friends at Tauck, of course. So the weather's been pretty good.
Weather was wonderful. I mean,
it's fall now.
Yeah, it is, but it's still warmer. So we hope to see you
as soon as possible.
As soon as possible, maybe at Christmas.
All right. Well, we're doing a tour right now, so it's nice to see you. I'm gonna let Birgit get back on it.
Take care, Bill.
Ciao, Stefano. Grazie.
Okay. Ciao, Stefano. Yes, that was great. So glad that we saw Stefano. Stefano is the front office manager of the Hotel Brunelleschi, where one of our tours stays. I am going to bring up just one more share screen, which is what Florence looked like in the early 1300s. And here you can see what I was talking about. The town was surrounded by a city wall. We see the Baptistery, which was already finished, built in the 11th century, and then we see how the cathedral is just started with an older marble facade, which is not the same that we have today. And then we see all these tower houses and how they have projections sometimes so that there was a little bit more space on the second and third floor of the tower house. So some of you, I know, have been to places like San Gimignano. San Gimignano still has a number of tower houses. Eventually, these tower houses also became status symbols. And the higher your tower was, the wealthier or more powerful you were. That's what the story is in San Gimignano, which here is called the Manhattan of the Middle Ages. It's just about an hour south of Florence. And there we still have 14 tower houses. In Florence, most of the tower houses have been cut down over the course of time. So you have to look for them now. Oftentimes they're on corners and they're woven into the city architecture. I hope you enjoy how Bill is riding through the streets. We see people walking around. We have reached a certain degree of normalcy, let's put it that way. Normally, however, that's one thing that is not normal. we have approximately 11 million visitors that come to Florence. And this year, the number of visitors has been much, much less than that. It probably didn't even reach 1 million. Most of the visitors came this summer. They were people from France and from Germany and Austria and Switzerland, some of them from Scandinavia, and we dearly miss our American friends. That's such a big part of the economy, makes up a big part of the economy. Let's go to the right here, Bill. Little alleyway that takes us into the quarter of town where Dante Alighieri was born and where he lived as a young man. Our first stop will be that small church. Ring your bell, Bill. So will be that small church that is coming up. And that small church where you already see the awning coming out, that is Dante's church, as we call it. This is where Dante Alighieri went to church on Sunday mornings because he lived in this quarter of town as a young man. In this church, this is also where his platonic love, Beatrice Portinari, is buried. So Bill, go a little bit further ahead. Okay, now we're moving again. So Bill might be in a place where he doesn't have very good internet, but I think he's moving a little bit closer. Okay, he's going to be back in a moment. So let me tell you a little bit more about Dante. Dante lived in this quarter. He was born there in 1265. And he actually, where Bill is standing now, and let's turn the phone over, so because now we have it upside down, Bill. So go ahead and turn your phone a little bit. Okay, that's great. So this is now a museum dedicated to Dante. But this was the area where Dante was born in 1265. He's very famous because he wrote a book, and the book is called Divine Comedy. The book takes us to 3 places, to hell, purgatory, and heaven. It talks about corruption and what's going on in politics, and it talks about what's going on down in Rome and so on. It's all written in rhyme form. Beautiful book. Our students, our children study it in the 2nd year of middle school when they're 13 years old. In this book, Dante uses not the written language of his time. He uses the Florentine street slang, what we call the volgare, the vernacular. Volgare meaning the local street slang. He does it because he wants for people to understand what he's writing, even though they can't read themselves. But if they're being read to, then they can understand what Dante wrote in the book. And after Dante, other authors do that as well. They start using the Florentine street slang, Boccaccio, Petrarca, and slowly but surely, the Florentine street slang becomes the accepted language of the Italian peninsula. And that is what we speak in this country today, Italian. It has changed very little from the 1300s when Dante originally wrote the book. So therefore, we call Dante the father of the Italian language, Dante Alighieri. All right, Bill, let's head on. I see another tower house there on the corner. That tower house is also still there the way it used to be in its original form. It's called Torre della Castagna. Torre means tower, Castagna means chestnut. This is where in the 1200s, the city council came together. Whenever the city council, the so-called priori, the city councilors voted, they always threw a chestnut into a bag in order to express their yes. Chestnut in Italian is castagna, and in Florentine, it is ballotta. That's where we get the word ballottaggio from, or in English, ballot, right here in Florence. Ballotte were the chestnuts that the priori, that the city councilors voted with. So it's raining a little bit tonight, but I think it's cleared up somewhat.
Yep, it's good.
Okay, wonderful. So a little bit of street work. We know this, so we're going to go around. Again, still going through the medieval quarter of town.
Oh, this is a great place where I like to get food sometimes, Birgit.
Oh,
Let's
yes.
see. Let's see if I can say hi to my friend, the Tripaio. Oh, Tripaio. Oh, he's not here today. Buongiorno, buonasera. Ah, non c'è altro. Ci fai vedere un po' di trippa? Eccolo là.
Oh, so this is where
Florentine
Italians
specialty.
come. Yes, to get a Florentine specialty,
Grazie.
which is called lampredotto, or also tripe. I know your mouth is watering as you hear this, but Florentines love this. These are called tripe or lampredotto stands, and lampredotto and tripe are parts of the different stomachs of the cow. So Florentines love innards. The way that they prepare the tripe is they work it into a tomato sauce, and then they put it onto a sandwich. That's true for the tripe and also for lampredotto.
I love my lampredotto sandwiches for sure.
So you've turned half Italian.
Sauces.
1993, yeah, Bill. Yes.
I'm not a fan of the tripe, tripa, but I like lampredotto, which is a different stomach. You guys can look it up.
All right. So Bill is heading down and out of the medieval quarter. In the distance already, we can see the City Hall of Florence. City Hall of Florence, which goes back to the time period when the cathedral was built. So 1299 is when it was started, finished in the early 1300s, 1330s. This is where the city council got together. It still is our city hall to this day. So our mayor, Dario Nardella, has his offices inside the City Hall of Florence. There's a statue of Cosimo I de' Medici, who was one of the dukes. The Medici ruled as dukes and later on grand dukes from the 1530s until 1737. And it was this man, Cosimo I, who moved his family into the town hall in 1540. He was married to a wife from Spain, Eleonora. They had 11 children. They govern from the town hall. They live in there. So that was a political choice, obviously. It was Cosimo who was Florence. Then the Medici changed residence once again. They moved to the other part of Florence, to the Oltrarno, where they have bought a palace from the Pitti family, Palazzo Pitti. They move in there. That becomes the new residence. And this one is the old palace from that moment on. That's what the Florentines still call it to this day, Palazzo Vecchio. So we don't say town hall, we say Palazzo Vecchio. During the time period when the Medici were in charge and they lived inside the building, Cosimo also wanted for the front yard, this square that you're seeing on the right, Government Square, to be decorated with statues. So Neptune is an addition to the square that was made in 1565. He's the god of water, stands as part of a fountain. The Florentines have never liked that statue. They've always called it Il Biancone, which translated means the great white lump. They just get used to all the muscles and all that. Yes?
Okay, so somebody asked why the TV cruise, and as you were talking, I asked them, and tomorrow the Presidente della Repubblica is showing up here. So they're getting ready for him. That's why they have the TV cruise out here.
Okay, fantastic.
The President of the Republic, see?
Yes.
Okay.
So we have a prime minister, and then we also have a president who's more like a figurehead, the person that actually rules the country and makes the executive decisions in Italy is the prime minister, who right now is Conte. All right.
That's why there's only one. That's why there's only one truck, because he's not as important.
Okay, let's go back to another statue. Let's go back to Palazzo Vecchio. We definitely want to show our guests the statue of David. What you see here is not the David by Michelangelo. That David, the original David, is kept in the gallery of the Academy. However, the original David used to stand right in the same spot where now the copy stands until 1873. In 1873, the original was taken over to the Academy in order to preserve him better for future generations. So a few years later, in 1911, this copy was made, which is the same height as the original David, 4 meters and 34 centimeters, so about 14 feet, just the statue without the pedestal, and the same material, Carrara marble. We see David in the moment when he still has the slingshot draped over his back. He's about to size up Goliath, because the story is about David and Goliath, and he's about to whirl that slingshot around to pull it out from under him with the right hand and to throw the stone against Goliath and subsequently kill him. Story of David and Goliath. Michelangelo worked on the statue for 3 years, 1501 to 1504. This is a copy made by a Florentine workshop in 1911. Let's go to the corner where we see a former office building with the many windows there. This used to indeed be where the different departments of the Duchy of Florence had their seats, so the economy department, the state department, and so on. Therefore, the building was called Uffici. Today we call it Uffizi. So now it contains an art gallery, which has famous works in it by Michelangelo, by Leonardo da Vinci, by Raphael, Titian, Tintoretto, you name it. And I'm happy to announce that in the Uffizi next year, Tauck is going to offer on some departures private after-hour visits. So ask in reservations about those particular departures when only Tauck will be inside the building. Another building here, the so-called Loggia dei Lanzi, or Loggia of the Signoria. So a loggia is a building that is open to the side and has a roof on top. This is now an open air museum. This is where we can see famous works. For example, this one, the Perseus by Benvenuto Cellini, Perseus who just killed Medusa. This is the original statue from 1554. In the past, the loggia, there's Medusa. She was the Gorgon that petrified you when you looked at her. So Perseus was asked to come in and put an end to this terrible deed that Medusa did. There's her body with the blood gushing from the neck. So he manages to kill her with the sword that he still holds in the right hand. It's very nice that we can still have these original statues in our squares. We want to show you one more example of an original statue. It's on the far side of the same loggia. The loggia, by the way, was used in the past by the government to show itself to the people when they had things to announce. This statue here is by Giambologna from 1583. So the so-called rape of the Sabine women. Rape or kidnapping of the Sabine women, depicting a story from the founding years of Rome in the 8th century before Christ. What's special about this particular statue is that it has 3 people in it that go up in a spiral movement. So you have to walk around the whole statue, the whole sculpture to fully appreciate it. Up to that point, statues were made like the David or Neptune, where you just had one major viewpoint, which was the one from the front. But this one, you walk around to fully appreciate. Let's leave Signoria Square now. Bill, we have one more place that we want to show our guests. We are now going to head down the street. There is Signoria Square again. Remember, Signoria means government. So people are out and about, even though it has rained a little bit. All through the week, the weather has been more or less like this. Before that, it was still rather hot. So last week and the week before, we still had temperatures in the 80s and in the 90s. So now Bill is going to head down the street. He will be taking us across a small square. This is still the town hall, which was extended over the course of time. It now literally covers the whole city block. This is the door where usually those come out that have just gotten married. That's what you do in a town hall, obviously. At the bottom of the street here, we come to a small square dedicated to Florence, Piazza San Firenze.
I hear bells. Not close enough though.
Yeah, no, we can't hear them, Bill. Let's stop
Well,
here.
hey,
Oh, Hotel Bernini. There's another hotel where our guests stay on the 1-week Italy by train tour that starts in Venice, goes to Florence, and then ends in Rome. Hotel Bernini. Wonderful. Let's head down the street. Borgo di Greci. named after a family by that same name. Just a little bit more about the city nowadays. I had said that tourism is extremely important. Textiles, just like it was in the 12 and 1300s, is also still important. We have two big textile fairs, two big fashion fairs in Florence, one in January and one in June. Then in Prato, not far away from Florence, that is where the textile industry is really big. Also leather and gold are still produced in Florence. The individual artisans bring in quite a bit of money as well. Bill is going to stop one more time just here on the corner because we would like to show you where in the Roman period the amphitheater was located. Gladiator fights took place in the amphitheater. So where the street goes around in an oval, that's where the amphitheater used to be. In other words, these buildings were built in the Middle Ages in the 12 and 1300s on the ruins of the amphitheater. You can literally still go around the whole thing. We are going to cut right through the middle. In the distance, slowly but surely, we will see the Church of the Holy Cross. In Italian, Santa Croce. That's the Franciscan church in Florence. The Franciscans arrived in Florence in the early 1200s. This church was started during the same time period as the cathedral by the same architect, Arnolfo di Cambio, started in 1294, finished in the early 1400s. The Franciscan order is still present at Santa Croce in the complex with 7 friars that are keeping up maintaining the order. The claim to fame for Santa Croce is that inside we have something like a pantheon of the dead, in the sense that inside Michelangelo is buried, Galileo Galilei is buried, Machiavelli, who wrote Il Principe, the Prince, and also the famous composer Gioacchino Rossini, all buried inside Santa Croce. So in a way, it's almost a summary of Italian history. I'm happy to tell you that on one tour, which is Tuscany and Cinque Terre, we do take our groups inside this church early Sunday morning before anybody else gets to enter the church. It's always magnificent. So again, please inquire at reservations about that particular tour. I want to make one more mention because I know that many of you are probably asking yourself, it's a Roman Catholic church, so why at the top do we see the Star of David? 2 reasons. Sometimes the Jewish symbols, such as the Star of David, do show up on Roman Catholic buildings or on Christian buildings in general, because that shows the continuity from old to new, Old Testament and New Testament in Christianity. And also in this particular case, the architect who made the facade, it's one of those examples where the facade was produced much later after the church was already finished, in this case in the 1860s. The architect of the facade was Niccolò Matas, who happened to be Jewish. He was from Ancona. When he grew older, he expressed the desire to be buried inside Santa Croce Church. The administrators were a little bit doubtful about that. He's Jewish, it's a Roman Catholic church. So they did the next best thing, and they buried the architect of the facade of Santa Croce inside the staircase under the facade that he created, right next to the main door, Niccolò Matas. We're going to swing over for a moment, and if you want to get closer, please do. Go ahead and ride your bike over there, Bill. We're going to show you one more thing, and that is the statue of Dante, famous personality, born in 1265. The statue was made in 1865 on the 600th anniversary of Dante Alighieri. So Dante, the famous writer who wrote this book that we talked about earlier, which is the Divine Comedy. And with that, at this point, I want to thank you for listening to me. I trust that we were able to bring Florence close to you. Of course, we wish you were here, and we can't wait for you to come back. We're here waiting with open arms for you in Florence so that we can show you all this in person. right, Bill?
Yay. Yep. We're here.
Yeah.
And if you want to do
Okay.
any other live tours, you can always go on www.virtuallylivetours.com. We've got
That's
lots of
right.
cool stuff there. It was great. I didn't run over any kids. It didn't rain, and no dogs jumped out in front of me. So I say it was a success.
Okay, that's wonderful. Oh, Bill.
Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Someone's just showing up with a pizza.
Oh,
It's Colin.
what?
It's Colin. Hold on. Let me see. There's another talc supplier guy. Look at this. What's he got?
This is a real talc.
Oh my gosh.
And your dinner tonight.
My dinner. Oh, because I just did a huge bike ride. I'm starving.
Okay, perfect. This is it. Ready?
All right. Well, you know what? Let's have it inside your little covered area right there. I'll sit down. Birgit and I will do a little question and answer period. How's that sound?
That sounds great.
Hi, everybody.
Yes.
All right.
And
There's
Colin
Colin. Yes.
manages Finisterre, which is where we go on a couple of our itineraries on the Classic Italy tour, but also on the Bridges tour. In fact, this beautiful pizza that Colin is holding in his hand was probably made by Calogero, who is the pizzaiolo who teaches the kids
Calogero.
how to make pizza.
You're absolutely right, Birgit. Calogero.
Okay, fantastic.
Vámonos, andiamo. That was a little Spanish, but andiamo, sit down. I got to eat my pizza. I'm starving. All right, where are we going, Colin? You're going to go sit right over here? So, folks, if you have questions, start posting, and Birgit and I will do our best to answer. If we know the answer, we'll tell you. If we don't, we'll make something up that's pretty good.
Thank
Right,
you
Birgit?
so much, Bill and Birgit. We really appreciate you guys doing this for us. Bill, I'm just going to mute you really quickly. Okay. And I'm going to cancel his spotlight. Okay. So we do have some questions coming in, and we had a bunch that came in throughout. So Birgit, why don't, this one's for you. Are museums and churches open for visitors in Florence currently?
Yes, they sure are. So the Uffizi is open, the Accademia is open, the Bargello, which is our sculpture museum, that is open, and also the churches can be visited. So Santa Croce, then there's another church by the train station, Santa Maria Novella. Absolutely, yes. So in that sense, we're back to normal. Inside, you have to wear a mask, but that's true everywhere. If you go to the grocery store, if you go inside a hotel or whatever, you have to wear a mask. But they're open for visitors. And what we try to do is we try to respect the distancing.
Right, okay, great, thank you. Going back to the Gates of Paradise quickly. A question came through is, are those cast bronze? And if not, do you know what they're made of?
Yes, exactly. So they are bronze. Even the copies are made from bronze. So the originals are made from bronze, and then there's a layer of gold on top. So that is true for both, the copies and the originals, made from the same material, bronze, and then a layer of gold on top.
Great, thank you. And as we're talking about materials here, has anything been done to stabilize the David against earthquakes? Some of our guests have heard that there are cracks coming through in his ankles.
Mm-hmm. So the last time they did a major makeover of David was back in 2004, which would have been his 500th birthday. That's when they cleaned him. And also what they always do is they have instruments with which they measure how he's holding up. And so he's constantly monitored. I think that if it came to the moment where they're worried about him, they would start supporting him somehow, but that is not the case yet. So he still stands proud and tall inside the gallery of the Academy.
Got it, thank you. Another one here, this one is about kind of the streets of Florence here. Now, do you know where cars are allowed and not allowed? Some guests were wondering as Bill was riding around if cars were allowed on those narrow streets or not.
Yeah. Do you want to take that, Bill, or are you eating your pizza?
No, I'm not eating my pizza, but there's a loud Italian woman here. So if it gets too loud, just go ahead and mute me. The question was, can you drive? Limited driving. Maybe I'll go move, actually. Oh my gosh. Let me go move, and then I'll come back to that question.
Okay, we can attack another one in the meantime, Bill. Are weddings still held in the Duomo, Birgit?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you can get married in the Duomo. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. There's going to be a little bit of a wait, but you can do it. Mm-hmm.
You have to get on the waiting list for that, I'm sure, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Here's a fun one. What about Italy and Florence do you love the most after being here for so long and not growing up in Florence?
Oh, okay. Well, I was actually hoping you would ask me that question because just this morning I thought about it. I went to the baker shop, which is right around the corner from my house, about 2 minutes away. Chatted there for a little while with the lady behind the counter. Then I went over to a tiny little coffee bar, which also serves milk, which also sells milk because we had run out of milk. And I was thinking about how much I enjoy the personalized service, that we still have these tiny little shops where you can actually build up a relationship with the people that are selling you things. So in this case, who are serving you. So that I really enjoy. So it's not all big supermarkets, big malls or something like that. It's still very personal. You go to the market, you catch up with the flower lady. That's who you always buy your plants from. And it's just nice because you're in touch. It's very intimate with the people. And that's what I really enjoy about this country.
That's fun. That's great. That intimacy is great for travel and for living there, I'm sure.
Yes.
So why don't we, Bill, are you in a spot now you can answer that question?
Yes. I'm sorry, but you need to repeat the question. She was so loud I couldn't hear it.
Where are cars allowed on the street? And, are they allowed on most streets or in those small alleyways or not?
They are allowed on almost all the streets, depending on the type of permission that they have. So there's different levels of permission. So, and that's designed by your neighborhood. So for where I live is in the Oltrarno, and that is designated by an O sticker that I have on my car. And I also have a transponder. So when I drive into my part of the neighborhood, it turns off the camera so I don't get a picture taken of my license plate and get a €90 ticket. So each area of Florence has its own little area. I can only enter in certain areas and I can't enter in others. So if you have a car and you live here in Santa Croce, then you're going to have your transponder for this zone so you can drive in. But it's very strictly limited only to residents.
Got it. Thank you, Bill. And while we've got you here, another one for you. As you were biking around here, a lot of guests were interested in how the heck you were doing that. Where did you have the camera? How were you focusing the lens? All that stuff. I know those are your trade secrets, but is there anything anything you can give away about how you're riding around and capturing?
Nope. Trade secrets.
I think.
Sorry.
Why don't we move on to leather goods then? Both of you could probably answer this. Where the significance of leather in Florence? Where does it come from, and why is everything leather so special?
Mm-hmm. So leather over the course of time has actually always been an important good. Just think in the past how you needed to make leather saddles, you had hats, you had boots, you had leather armory. And here in Florence, they just made it in a particularly strong and good way. One of the reasons is that the Arno River is not that far away, so water is needed in order to tan the hide and process the leather. And to this day, in places like Santa Croce sull'Arno, which is about 30 minutes away, they still have those leather tanneries. They're still working and processing the hide into leather nowadays. They just have a very strong history of it, and that's why they can do it so well. So that's why Florence just is kind of the center in terms of where people like to look for leather or check out leather goods.
Anything to add there, Bill?
No, I was going to say the same thing. It came from the what I learned was that it came from the Florentine armies back then, having some of the best armor, and all the armor back then was made out of leather. If you think about it, the Romans had it too. If you think about Spartacus running around with his, turtle shell, 6-pack, 8-pack, however many he had in there, that was all leather.
Cool. Thanks, Bill. Birgit, back to something you mentioned a bit earlier. Could you repeat the number of the Jewish community living in Florence, the number of Jewish people
Casata.
currently? And
Yes.
how many synagogues are actively functioning, if you know that?
Okay, so in Florence, we have one synagogue. It's a monumental synagogue, the one that I showed you in the slide. The Jewish community is 900 Jewish citizens strong. I would also like to mention at this point that over all of Italy, there are approximately 35 to 38,000 Jews living in a population of 60 million. So the population of Italy is 60 million. 35 to 38,000 are Jewish citizens. And in Florence, 900 out of 380,000 people. In Florence, we have one, but then there are other monumental synagogues. Rome has one, Turin has one as well. Siena has a synagogue as well. It's not a monumental synagogue. It's actually what used to be a church that was turned into a synagogue. I was quite taken by it when I saw it with my guests a couple of years ago. It's quite special. And then other towns have synagogues as well, but the big monumental ones are in Turin, in Florence, and in Rome.
Great. Okay, we have time for, I'll do two more. I'll do one more for you, Birgit, and then one for you, Bill. Birgit, can you go into the tower houses a bit more and explain are those privately owned? Can you actually access them and see them as a tourist?
Mm-hmm. So tower houses like the ones that we showed you just now, the first one, which was in Piazza Santa Elisabeth, that has actually been turned into a kind of a residenza. So it's a place where you can rent a room, but on a very high level. It's kind of a bed and breakfast, but on a very high level. Then others are privately owned, off and on. The other one that we showed you, Torre della Castagna, that is sometimes open for visits. But if guests are interested in seeing a tower house the way it used to be, I recommend the town of San Gimignano, because in San Gimignano, they made it possible just recently. They opened up one of these tower houses. It's the Torre Campatelli that you can visit and you can see, and you have a guided tour there. It's really amazing. So that would be my recommendation if a guest would like to see one on the inside.
Great, thank you. Last one for you, Bill. We've got some folks here interested in your foodie knowledge. So can you explain a little more about the Lampredotto? Did I pronounce that correct?
Lampredotto, yes. And it's called Lampredotto because it's the lining of, okay, my knowledge is good, but it's not this good. I think it's the third or the fourth. It's the last stomach in the digestion process. So, and it's called Lampredotto because it looks like lamprey eel. So that's why it's called Lampredotto. So it's the lining of the last stomach of the cow, and they put it in tomatoes and water and they boil it. And then you get it on, you can get it in a little, what they call the vaschetta, which is like a little bowl, and they put sauces on it. They put a green sauce, which is garlic, obviously olive oil, and parsley. And then you can put a little bit of red pepper flake, a little bit of red pepper on there, and they drizzle other little things on there, and they put it on like a little round bun. So that is Lampredotto. It's old-time food, an oldie but goodie.
I'm very hungry now, Bill. After seeing the pizza, after that explanation, I need to eat some lunch, I think.
If you see the Lampredotto, it'll take your, if you see it, it'll, you know, it's not that appetizing looking as you saw.
Birgit, can you do me a favor and put up that last slide?
Yes, I sure will. I'm going to do one more share screen.
I will ask you one more question before we end here. A couple questions came through about World War II and if any of the buildings within Florence were damaged, how extensive was it?
Yeah, very good question. So the Germans had occupied Florence until August of 1944. That is when the Allies, the Commonwealth and the Americans had made it up the Italian peninsula to Florence, and they came from the south, and they were the ones who liberated Florence from the Germans. The Germans left going north. So as they did that, they wanted to prevent the Allies from crossing the Arno River, which was kind of a natural barrier. So the Germans mined all the bridges with the exception of the Ponte Vecchio, where they didn't mine the bridge itself, but the area leading up to the bridge to block the way. But all other bridges were mined and blown up to prevent the Allies from crossing the river. And in an attempt to prevent the Germans from getting out easily, the Allies then bombed two nods, the train station, Campo di Marte, and also the main train station. Thank goodness nothing went astray. So out of the artworks that we have in Florence and the beautiful buildings, they were not touched, other than, like I said, Ponte Vecchio, one side, the area leading up from the south side, that was totally destroyed by the Germans. So it was more focused on strategic areas during the Second World War, but there was some damage done in Florence, yes.
Great, thank you so much, Birgit. And again, thank you so much, Bill, for riding around with us today and showing us the sites, and Birgit for narrating along the way. We really do appreciate it. And thank you to all the guests who joined. We appreciate your time as well, and we can't wait to welcome you back in beautiful Florence and in other locations around the world as soon as is safely possible to do so. Anything else you'd like to part with, Birgit or Bill?
Well, for me, it definitely was a pleasure. It's just about as close as it gets to a real tour, and it was just so much fun. And I want to thank Bill for doing such a great job with the filming. Yeah, it was great. Really enjoyed it, and thank you for your facilitating, Dustin.
Yep, I just would like to say the same thing that Birgit said, and it was great to do the tour with you, Birgit, as it is all of our tours that we do together. And thanks to everybody for coming, and be supportive of our businesses that we have here in Florence, because it's a little bit rough right now, but we're getting through it. And we're hoping that you'll get back here as soon as possible. Thank you, Dustin, as well.
No need to thank me. Thank you, Birgit and Bill, again, and one last final thank you to all our guests out there. We do appreciate it. Look out for an email at some point tomorrow with the recording link that will be live on our website. And again, if you'd like to look at any other tours from Birgit and Bill, you can visit virtuallylivetours.com at Bill's website, where you can show off some more areas of Florence for you. All right, with that, thank you, everyone, and I hope you all have a joyous day, evening, or morning, wherever you are hailing from. Bye, all.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Have a good dinner, lunch, breakfast.